Let's take a look inside the Classroom Diagnostic Tools Computer Adaptive Test Engine. The Computer Adaptive Test Engine is also known as the CAT. The CAT is capable of dynamic question selection. It can tailor test difficulty to the individual student. It has greater precision of scores across a wide range of achievement levels. The CAT spends time on just right question difficulty. The questions are not too easy or too hard for the student. And the CAT is as precise as a 100 question fixed formed test. Let's look at the test blueprint to understand a little bit more about the CAT. So in the classroom diagnostic tool, there are diagnostic categories. They are the same as reporting categories in the PSSA or the Keystone exam. So the example on the left over here shows the reporting categories for the PSSA ELA test, but they're also the diagnostic categories for the CDT ELA test. The computer adaptive test plays somewhat of a high-low game. It begins with one item. If that item is answered correctly, the next item presented requires more skill. If that's answered correctly, the next item presented requires even more advanced skill. If I back up and the previous item was incorrect, then the next item presented requires medium skill. And we could even go back to the beginning and say if the first item was incorrect, the next item presented would require less skill. And if that's correct, it could go to a medium skill item. Or if it was incorrect, it could go to an item requiring less skill. It is continuously calibrating student responses and then selecting the next item based on the previous response. When the classroom diagnostic tool begins, the very first 8 items are considered locator items. There are 2 items per diagnostic category, and they are at the grade level of the assessment, and the diagnostic categories assessed are given in random order. So if you look in our chart, the question sequence is numbers 1 through 8. All of them happen to be 7th grade. That is the grade level of the student in the example. And the diagnostic categories are in random order. The question difficulty is assigned to each item, and you can see that the items are of average difficulty, and you begin to understand what average is by looking at these scores. If it would be the second administration of the CDT for the student, it would remember the student based on the characteristics that the student displayed in prior information or the first session. So looking at this now with all of the information present, that locator section, the first 8 items, they are all in the same grade level. They are random diagnostic categories that are presented in those first 8 items, but 2 items from each of those categories. They are of average question difficulty, and now we can see how the student responded. In the question score column, the student got the first 4 out of 5 correct. And you can see the first one was a scale score of 1188, and then there's a continuous calibration of that scale score with each item that's answered. When we move on to items 9 through 20 in the classroom diagnostic tool, we see that there still happen to be at grade level for the student. The diagnostic category continues to be random, and we can see the question difficulty in this one, they answered correctly, and item number 10, they gave a question that was a little bit more difficult. That one was incorrect, so it drops down to an item that is requiring a little bit less skill. That was correct. Next item requires a little bit more skill. You can see in the scaled score total that it is continuously calibrating the student's scaled score and their score for each of the reporting categories. If we look at the next slide, we can see the category that was a strength now that the test is over for the student. And this happened to be geometry was the student's strength. Look over here to the left at the question sequence. These are not in numerical order because remember there is a random selection. We look at the grade and course and we can see they started off with 7th grade questions. And at some point they moved to high school and we can see right here where they've answered 4 out of the first 5 correctly at the 7th grade level. So the system jumped up then to the high school level. That was incorrect. The next high school level question of geometry was incorrect. So it bumps back down to 8th grade. And that was correct. Next item, which would be item 27, was a little bit more difficult. That was correct. Goes back to high school, incorrect. If you look all the way over to the far right, the probability of correct, the system is trying to get to the point where the items are a 50% likelihood of the student answering correctly. And so that probability of being correct, you can see they're hovering right around that 50%. This view is of a category that is an area to grow for the student. Measurement, data, and probability was not a strength for the student. You can see again on the left the questions that fall into that category. The second column shows the student was answering questions at the 7th grade and 6th grade level. And let's dig a little deeper here. Question number 4 was incorrect, so that goes to an easier question difficulty. That was correct. And the next time they come around, the difficulty is a little harder. That was incorrect. And incorrect again. And you can see the student is incorrect on the next one. So it is dropping it down in difficulty level, correct. And now we'll bump up a little bit and follow along. But look over here to the far right, where again, we're trying to hone in on the probability of 50% that the student will be able to answer the next question correctly. The classroom diagnostic tool test ends when it's met one of 2 conditions. So the first condition would be that the student has taken at least a predefined minimum number of questions in that diagnostic category, and the standard error is below a predefined threshold. So in math and science, that minimum number would be 12. And if it's in ELA, the minimum number would be 10. And the standard error in the predefined threshold would be in the 70s for math and science, and in the 90s for ELA. Now, the other condition was the student has taken a predefined maximum number of questions in that diagnostic category. So there are a possibility of 10 to 12 questions per diagnostic category. In ELA, 12 would be the maximum. If we were in science or math, the maximum number of questions would be 15. So students have a minimum of 12, but a maximum of 15 per diagnostic category to meet one of those criteria. And once they hit the minimum number and a predefined threshold for the standard error, the test could end. Or when they reach the maximum number of questions permitted in that diagnostic category, and then eventually all of the categories, then the test would end. If you have questions about how the CDT, Computer Adaptive Test Engine, works, please feel free to contact one of the state co-leads listed on this slide.